As we head into Mother's Day weekend, we want to take a look at how motherhood has changed over time. In 1968, CBC News featured Rosemary and Graham Waldie, shedding light on how a typical middle-class Vancouver family lived and worked at that time. This clip was filmed at a turning point when their eldest daughter was moving out of the family home to get married. Have a look.
Yes, I'm sure.
One family, 6 individuals. The children sometimes rebelling against the parents, who have irrevocably molded their personalities, the father and mother confident that they have raised their children in the best way that the circumstances would allow.
My wife can communicate with her kids just like one of them. I think she's very skillful this way. And so I'll use her as an intermediary between us. And so if there's any problem with the children, we've either said it jointly or she said it for me. And I've backed her up without question. Like, you know, I haven't felt that I haven't always agreed with my wife the way she's brought up her children. But I also realize that if I don't, then I have to do it myself.
He really didn't have too much to do with the overall running of looking after the children. It wasn't a matter of he left it to me. We talked things over. It was just, I don't know whether I interpreted him for the kids or, I don't know. The way we lived, it was just necessarily I was the, you know, the thing with my children, and my husband did his job and we were there. See, I've always listened to what the kids had to say, whether I believed in it or not, and I always encouraged them to say. I don't want them rubber stamps of me. I have no confidence. I have a lot of things wrong with me. So I didn't want this to happen to the kids. I mean, this was my life.
Joining us now to look at what we just heard and more is Sylvia Fuller. She's a sociology professor at UBC. Thanks for joining us. It sounds like the Wallies had a rather clear division of labor in that house at that time. How common was that in the 1960s?
Well, that was certainly the dominant pattern, right? You had this idea that, you know, mothers had a certain role and fathers had a certain role, and they were very distinct and they were complementary. So men were mostly involved in bringing in the money to financially support the family, but all the day-to-day work of being with the kids, supporting them, parenting them effectively was really the domain of women. So if we go back, I don't have data from the 1960s, but mid-1970s, about 41% of mothers were employed. And of course, now that's changed radically. So the vast majority of mothers are employed. We're at about 77% there. And most mothers are employed full-time. So we're seeing much more convergence with women's employment. And of course, men are also more involved with their kids' lives than they were before.
Are there numbers on how much more common it is for fathers and male figures to be involved in, for example, division of labor and parenting? I had to laugh when the husband said, I backed my wife up without question because if she didn't do the parenting, it would be, quote, left to me.
Yeah, and it's funny, right? Because you listen to that clip and it sounds like, oh, what a terrible thing. I would have to do the parenting. And in fact, what we see now is that dads want to be involved in the parenting, right? And moms want the dads to be involved too. So there's a sea change in sort of attitudes around that. So we can track this to some extent over time. We do see that men are putting in more time in the day-to-day hands-on work of taking care of kids. But at the same time, we haven't seen a complete convergence there. So of the amount of time, and you know, the most recent data that we really have released here is back from 2015. We have more recent data, but we haven't really had that released yet. You know, 65% of the time that was spent taking care of kids and families was being done by mothers. So dads are definitely more involved. We see a change over time. They're more likely to be involved. They spend more time when they are involved, but we're not at convergence. And that's still the case even when moms are working full time. They're still putting in more time in the childcare than the dads are. And
as we heard from the mother in 1968, quote, this was my life. We have gone from motherhood being the primary role a woman was expected to fill, perhaps at that time, to some of them having an expectation on some women that they can have and are expected to have a full career as well. How do we balance those two? And do you think it's gotten more manageable over time?
Well, Well, the question of more manageable has to do with the infrastructure that we have, right? So we are doing things like building up our childcare infrastructure right now in the country, and that is really critically important to enable both parents to be employed. Is you need to have affordable, accessible, high quality childcare. So we are building up those supports there. So in that respect, we will see that becoming easier. On the other hand, there are also some trends in employment that make it a little bit more challenging for parents to combine, a situation where both parents are employed and all the needs of childcare. And so we see things like the rise of more irregular schedules. And it's really when you don't know when you're going to be working day to day, week to week, it's really hard to manage that. There's, I have my kid in the background talking here. So that's harder. And we also see creeping up of hours and expectations for people in professional jobs in particular to be putting in really long hours. And so that's getting harder as well.
Sylvia Fuller, sociology professor at UBC, we very much appreciate your time and expertise. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.